Right, so you've built your Hyperlore Airshot, you've used KISS V2, and maybe you want to do a bit of this. Bit of cinematic.
Who are you really?
But either way, we need to set this guy up. So this video is going to be split into two parts. There's going to be a little bit of a waffle about two Hyperlore Airshot frames that I've made. And I'll talk about the differences I felt in the air, and then the second part of the video will just be a pure KISS V2 FETEC setup of both the flight controller and the ESC and some PIDs to get you started. So as previously, I built myself a Hyperlore Airshot, and this is the Vert version. But I also built myself a Hyperlore Airshot with flat arms as well. And weight wise, they're very similar. This guy, the flat arm version, uses the 20x20 FETEC ESC, but as you can see, it's carrying the additional GoPro mount for when I do some reverse footage. And this guy does not have that on, but is using the bigger 30x30 FETEC flight controller. But they're within 5 grams of each other, so they should fly relatively similar, motors aside. But the two huge differences are, or the one huge difference is the arm layout. These are 5mm wide by 10mm deep, and these are 5mm thick by whatever they are, 1.3mm or so wide. And I expected to be able to notice that difference, the vertical arm versus flat arm, but the differences in flight were really bigger than I expected. The Vert version feels almost like a race quad in comparison to the flat arm version, and I've flown a couple of packs with a flat arm version with the RC nPower GTS2 motors, the 2207.5. And even with the bigger motors, more powerful motors than this guy, the flat arm version, you can just feel the difference. It feels like you're running a lot more expo on your rates and throttle than it does on this guy. The difficulty for me is when I first flew this guy, I kind of felt a little bit out of control. The quad was just cutting through the air, etc., quicker than I was expecting it to do, whereas this guy felt like a pair of old slippers, really comfortable. It felt and moved in the way I'd expect it to do. The difficulty for me is saying, is there a better one? And right now I can't give you that answer. This guy, it took me a couple of packs to start getting used to it, but then when I flew subsequently the flat arm version, it felt really woolly in comparison. And that woolliness is something I tend to like because, again, it comes with the sort of smooth flowing freestyle, which is what I aim to do, whereas this guy felt a lot more snappier. Now, part of that is down to the motors. The Vert version is using the Blackbird T-Motor V, should I say the T-Motor Blackbird V2, which is a 2207. And this guy is now running the RC nPower SMUX 2306.6, I think they are. In terms of volume and size, they're very similar, the 2207 being marginally larger. The T-motor is much snappier a motor than the RC nPower. Setting aside the differences in frame, it just spools up quicker. It wants to burst into power quicker, where the RC nPower by comparison, is a much more lazy motor, and that plays into its smoothness. It's not going to sort of give you twitches or anything like that because it has that sort of lazier pickup. The power is there, it just doesn't come in a crazy sort of burst like the T-motor does, which is, you always feel initially when you're flying it like you've over throttled or you've given it too much gas. The T-motor is an absolutely lovely motor. From the brief sort of 5 packs I've run through it, it's super smooth and it's super responsive, as I would expect from a motor with the Blackbird name on it, because that is his forte. The difficulty becomes, I don't think the SMU X is the best motor that RC InPower have made. I don't think it doesn't have the ultimate power of the GTS2, which is a bigger motor, and of course will always have more power, but it gives that power in a much snappier response, and it doesn't have the ultimate smoothness and throttle response of the GTS 2306. It's kind of in the middle, which begs the question, why yet again have I gone out and bought another RC InPower SMU X motor? And the reason for that is price. With a 20% discount that I got from Banggood by saving 200 points and buying a discount code with it, these guys came in at 48 quid, whereas I did the same thing with the T-motor and they came in at 70 quid. So there's a huge difference in cost between it, and as me as a pilot, as much as I love the Blackbirds, and in the air they feel like a better motor compared to this guy, I would still personally buy the RC InPower for 2 reasons. One, I know they're absolutely bulletproof because I've run RC InPower for years, and 2, because of cost. So, 2 frames, very, very differently. I flew them both in exactly the same setup. In terms of which I prefer, the Vert is stunning to look at. It really is a beautiful thing. And the design really plays into its arms, and I want to spend more time with it. This guy, again, although I've tried to sort of pretty it up with its 3D mounts, it's just nowhere near as pretty as the Vert version. However, these arms will probably last longer than the Vert arms, which will be prone to breakage. And I should note that obviously the weight, although similar, is taken into account. I'm using the optional brace, so this guy would be lighter, probably because the motors are lighter. So that bit will waffle out of the way. What I'm going to do now is just talk you through the setup that I applied to both of these quads, the PIDs that I applied to both of these quads, flashing everything up and getting it all ready to go. The PIDs that I'm giving you aren't finalised PIDs. Neither of these quads and the footage that I'm showing are tuned. However, they're as good as they need to be at an initial stage. It will take me multiple flights before I'm comfortable and start to tune these quads, because you can't, or in my opinion, I don't tune quads in an open field with 3 trees that I can fly with my eyes closed. I will tune quads based around a more difficult location where I'm reacting as opposed to being really proactive, and proactive tends to mean that you get less prop wash, etc. Anyway, having said that, the PIDs are good. There are minimal bad things. A little touch more prop wash than I would expect on a very good KISS setup, but the rest of it is there or thereabouts, so I'm happy to sort of give these out. And you might just need to up P a little bit or drop I a little bit depending on your own setup. If you're running 4S or 5S, you'll probably need to increase your P gains by around 10 to 20%, because both of these quads are 6S. So that's the waffle out of the way. Let's talk setup. The first thing we're going to do is update the flight controller, so we'll just plug the USB in and download the latest KISS GUI, which at the time of this video is 2.027. And once you've done that, we're just going to flash the flight controller with the latest version of the KISS hex, or should I say FETEC in this case. Make sure you don't flash KISS, you flash the FETEC FETEC firmware. It's slightly different. Right, so you dive into the KISS GUI, And the first thing you're going to do is go across to FC Flasher, and you're going to select Remote Firmware, and then you're going to choose FETEC and the latest version. Do not flash KISS F7. You must flash FETEC KISS Flight Controller. And the latest version is the one that will give you return to home. Although, as I said previously, I am not using this hex file. I am using a custom hex file designed by Alexander Fedorov, and that will give me not just return to home at the press of a button, but return to home on failsafe. Once you've updated that firmware, you will go into configuration. In my case, I will choose TBS Crossfire. In your case, you will choose whatever particular receiver that you're running. Won't bother about any of the other stuff right now, but I will just set these up. So min throttle I will set as 1060. If you're feeling like your throttle is a little bit high, just drop it down to 1050. Max throttle 2000, min command 1000, and mid command 1500, and a D-shot 2400. I do not run idle up like Mr. Steele. I prefer air mode. If you're using the TBS Tango 2 like I am, be aware that there is a firmware bug in it. So if you wish your return to home to work correctly, make sure that you set it on medium stroke high if you're using the one position switch, which is either the very left or very right of your Tango V2. So for me, the right switch on the Tango is armed, and that's set to medium stroke high. It's a one position switch. The next position is level mode, buzzer on the same switch, turtle mode on the multi-position switch on the left, and return to home on the very far left switch, and again make sure it's set to medium stroke high. And then what we're going to do is go into advanced, and on the build video I reversed the direction of the flight controller, so you will need, as it shows here, to set yaw at 180 to tell KISS that obviously your flight controller is facing backwards. The rest of it we don't need to worry about. Launch mode, it will basically allow you to sort of hold your quad at a 45-degree angle prior to takeoff, like a racer maybe would do. We're going to choose advanced serial configuration. We're going to choose serial and serial 3 as DJI MSP. From my build video, that is the only thing I had to change. You're going to click buzzer emulation, emulate with motors, which will give you your motors acting as a buzzer, and then you have set point weight, and you can think as set point weight, if you're coming from beta flight, as a very basic version of feed forward. What set point weight in KISS terms is almost like an elastic band. If you had it at set point weight 100, your quad will be super responsive and super aggressive. If you have your set point weight set at 10, that elastic band will be really floppy and your quad will be really loose and droopy and unresponsive. 80 or 85 tends to be a pretty good setup for a freestyle quad with KISS. Obviously, enable adaptive filter, I haven't changed any of those things. And then you will come down to DJI OSD. And here you can choose what layout you want all of the DJI OSD things. So you can choose all around, top, middle, bottom, wherever you want them to be. And again, you can change the units to metric or imperial. On here you will click a GPS, and below are the GPS settings. Note equals basically just stock settings. So return to home, home altitude, descent radius, all the rest of it I leave as default. And I also have it set to loiter, which means that when the GPS returns the quad home, it will just kind of like buzz around at high altitude waiting for you to do something. With KISS GPS you can take control at any time using the sticks to make the quad roll or pitch, and you can turn it off obviously on your switch. The one thing to note about the way it activates is it activates and then does a punch out to its altitude of, for argument's sake, 40 meters. And that's fine for me because I'm not doing really long range. But if you were doing really long range, you lose, you need to hit return to home. Maybe your battery is pretty low. You might not want your quad doing a punch out to get to its required altitude, because that might trigger basically a brownout, or your quad falling from the sky because you've toasted your battery cells. If you don't want that to happen, then you need to basically choose maximum throttle. And in its basic state, maximum throttle will be 2000, the maximum stick input that you have. If you want it to be less and you want your return home altitude initial climb to be slower, turn that max throttle down to maybe 1900 or 1800, just so it happens slowly. Again, personally, I don't mind it like that, because if I fail safe, and in my case I have fail safe on return to home on fail safe, I want my quad to get up into clear air as quick as it humanly can. So personal choice. In data output, you will just make sure that your sticks, etc., are where they should be, and you will calibrate your accelerometer if you want your GPS to work correctly. If you don't calibrate your accelerometer, if you activate GPS, your quad will be all over the shop. So make sure you lie your quad on a level surface, in whichever way you can, and click calibrate accelerometer several times to make sure that it's as accurate as it can be. And then again, we've just got rates, which I'll come on to a little bit, TPA, which you don't need to mess with. So what you're going to do is you're going to plug in your quad, and we're just going to set up KISS first of all. So as you can see, it will sound if you don't have signal. So here's my radio. Now the first thing that we're going to do, with the props off, you need to test your motors. And you're basically just going to click test, I know what I'm doing, and then you're going to click enable motor test, and then you are going to choose the motor that you want to test. Now by default, you will notice that KISS, if I just unplug, KISS by default, if you go into the configuration page, has motor 1, 2, 3 and 4. So it's different than Betaflight. You will notice that in my particular case, I've just chosen 90-degree counterclockwise, because in this particular case the ESC on this build is upside down. All you will do is you will go into data output, you will click that test button, you will click on each of the motors, and then you will use your throttle to spin that particular motor. Okay. Obviously you will need Crossfire or your receiver working, so make sure that everything is hunky-dory in the receiver tab here. If your channel outputs are incorrect, unlike Betaflight, you will need to change them in your radio. You can't change them in the actual GUI. So if you're on TAER and you need to be on AETR, etc., you'll need to do it in your radio. So once, all you'll do is you'll click on motor 1, see which motor spins up, and then you will go back to the configuration tab and keep scrolling down here until you get the one that suits your configuration. When you've done that, spin all 4 motors and make sure they're spinning in the right direction, which we'll fix in a little while. On KISS, there isn't really much benefit in my experience of running your props reversed, which is common on Betaflight. Run them the normal direction, front spins inwards, back spins outwards. So just make a note if any of your motors are spinning the wrong way, which motor it is in the Kiss GUI. That is the majority of the settings. With regards to these PIDs, these are the PIDs that I was running in the flight footage. So we've got P 3.9, I 0.055, D14, P for pitch 4.5, 0.065, 16.6, yaw 6, 0.05 and 5. TPA I've left as it is, and I wouldn't ever touch that unless I had vibrations at a certain point throughout the throttle. The rates that you see here aren't my normal rates. Historically I would tend to run a degrees per second of around sort of 1200, and you can see here that these rates are around 800. When I flew the Tiny Trainer, I lowered my rates a lot just to make it feel more like a racing quad as opposed to a freestyle quad, and I really like the way it felt. So I'm just experimenting with rates at the moment, but these rates are working fairly well. It just feels like yours a little bit sluggish to me, so I'll probably keep tweaking them. But again, copy these if you will, or use your own personal rates. Obviously make sure your stick inputs for roll, pitch and yaw are at 1500 or thereabouts, as these ones are. The rest of the filters we will just keep as default. So with that out of the way, everything is working, everything seems okay. We're now going to update and flash the ESC. So we will disconnect there and we will go into the FETEC configurator, which again the link is in the download. Plug your quad in, again with props off, and connect. Sometimes it takes several attempts to do this. Don't ask me why, it's just one of those annoying quirks, as you can see. And so what we'll probably have to do is just unplug the USB, plug back in again and try again. So you might have to mess around with this. It seems to be a little bit buggy, but once you're in it you will see your 4 ESCs. If you go into settings, this is where you would change your motor direction. So you would just click the button and click save. You will notice I've got a few things set here. I've got ESC beeps, which is essentially just the beacon you keep hearing, and I've got slow start active, and I've also got soft brake active. Slow start is essentially exactly what it says, so it just starts your motors a little bit slowly. When you click on, the motors will spin up much more slowly than they would do normally. They won't burst immediately into the max idle. Vice versa, when you disarm, instead of the props immediately stopping due to braking, they will take a second to stop. And that last bit is interesting because one of the things that fries ESCs more than anything is active braking. So when you disarm, your motors stop, that sends a spike of current through the flight controller and the ESC, and FETEC have just designed this new system just to help fight against that. It's entirely up to yourself whether you use soft brake. Personally I like it, I love the noise that it makes. Once you've done that, just save the settings that you've done to each ESC and disconnect, and it is as simple as that. There is nothing else to it. Your quad is now set up exactly the same as mine. And again, don't do this at home, but if you were to arm, can you see the motor start up slowly? And there's the slow stop. Makes that lovely little buzzing noise when it stops. And that's how you stop your buzzer from your self-powered buzzer from going off. So there you go. One hyper low, Hyperlow Airshot, Freestyle Cinematic Quadcopter, a setup that you can use and you shouldn't have any problems. 9 times out of 10, if something's not working, you're not getting OSD or anything like that, you'll have just got the TX and RX wires crossed on the, in this case, the Cadex Vista, and the same with Crossfire, as I did on my build video. But that should be enough to get you going. Tweak those PIDs as needs be. I set my PIDs because I'm a relatively smooth pilot. If you're a much more snappy, aggressive pilot, you might prefer higher P. Again, you play around with them, but KISS is really, really easy to tune. So thanks for watching. Hope that was useful for somebody, and happy flying. Cheers, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye.